this is the time of day when everyone's really wanting a nap, so I hope you had a break between your last session and this one. And I don't have many slides here. We want to talk about transforming the Signal Regiment. I work in the office chief of Signal. Most people out there in the regiment don't know what that is. We do all the personnel life cycle management of Signal Corps enlisted soldiers, NCOs, officers, and warrant officers. So those 25 years in the Signal Corps and all that technical training I got and all that leadership training, well, now I'm doing something that's completely alien and I was unprepared for. So a year into the job, I feel like I'm finally getting the hang of it a little bit. I've got my two next in line in the room, and they'll keep me straight if I say something crazy. So with no further ado, let's talk about what's going on with the regiment. And you can stop and ask questions at any point. I really find that these briefings go better when you ask me your questions and I can take the chance to clarify something. A lot of misperceptions, I think, out there in the field, or just a sort of a dearth of information out there. You've heard that there's going to be change, but you don't necessarily understand it or understand why or how. So that's what we're here for today, to talk about that. Okay, here's what we're going to talk about. Like I said, not many slides. The most important thing, I think, is the question and answer session down there at the bottom. That didn't change. There we go. Okay. So if you don't know, you're in the Signal Corps, but maybe you've only served in maybe one little tiny part of the Signal Corps, or sort of a very common thread of places in the Signal Corps. A lot of people don't know that most of Signal soldiers in our regiment do not serve in Signal units. They serve in divisions, corps. There's a lot of Signal in the National Guard. Believe it or not, a big percentage of us. And so they don't necessarily we don't control what happens to those structures and those formations. So what we do in OCOS and what CDID does for you for the equipment world and all that, it's very important, and it is most difficult to affect in those formations. If you've ever served in one of those formations and you felt like you were kind of forgotten, well, hopefully this transformation will fix some of those problems for you. 1 October of this year, the 25 Golf Officer MOS goes into effect. We're going to talk about that at length. And also, if you were a 24 Alpha or a 53 Alpha officer before, you will now be 26 Alpha, 26 Bravo. And we'll talk about warrant officer changes too, but no MOS changes for warrant officers. Okay, so, the theme of this workshop is transforming the cyber workforce or something like that, right? So I want to talk about where Signal fits in cybersecurity. If you haven't seen this before, this kind of crystallizes it for you. There were several years where we in the Signal Corps kind of said, we don't do cyber, but if you've had the responsibility for any of these roles, we do cyber. We may not do this side of the chart, but we definitely, we are part of the cybersecurity workforce every day, all day, and the mission can't be done without the Signal Corps. Okay, so a little more about OCOS, what we do. These are personnel lifecycle management functions. We sort of build what the MOS should do. We build the macro training strategy. So the big parts of any MOS and what they should know, those are designed by OCOS for the commandant, okay? And we do those by holding things like SME panels. Sergeant Weiler over here came in December. I'm going to show you the enlisted transformation. And what we did was we held a subject matter expert panel of personnel from all the MOSs we already have in the Signal Corps. And they came and looked at every task that they perform in their MOS and said, where does this task fit in a new MOS? Where should it be binned? And that develops the macro training strategy. Then we turn it over to training developers in the other side of the schoolhouse, and they develop POIs to actually get on the platform and teach. So that's sort of how that flows. We also work on the authorization documents. That's a big responsibility of CDID, but we sort of staff the personnel piece of it. Topper, are you already falling asleep over there? Or are you taking notes? Okay. Verizon's going to love you, man. Okay, so this is sort of a take it with you slide. Not that interesting. All right, so we're going to jump right into enlisted transformation. So someone said Signal Corps is too big. You have 17 MOSs. It's too many. What we knew already is that we have 3 MOSs that are basically, if they're not dead, they're dying. Anyone know which ones they are? enlisted MOSs? Lima, Charlie, one more, Papa. Foxtrot's dead, by the way, it doesn't exist. But, so we knew we had to fix at least those three. And because, has anyone sat in on any briefings during TechNet where someone talked about convergence? Have you seen the convergence brief? Okay, so I probably should have included that, I guess. General Fogarty's convergence slide. Okay, imagine this, if you will. Over here, we've got transport convergence. You've heard about that, right? We're going to get what was Trojan Spirit. It's going to belong to the Signal Corps, and it's going to be called the McNay, and I never remember what McNay stands for, but it's a Trojan in a box. And so that will now belong to the S6. It will no longer belong to the S2. So right there, transport is going to be, that TS circuit is going to be brought in on WinT transport, okay? That's the first step of convergence, is the transport piece. The middle step is that we're going to converge data. So at the brigade level, you're going to have one single database. It's going to be called the Command Post Commuting Environment. Command Post Computing Environment, not commuting. Doesn't matter how you get to work. So that database will have one instantiation that's used for multiple purposes, right? So if you've got a grid and it has a target over it for the AFATADS guy, or it's, the MI guys are watching, or whatever, it's going to have one instantiation of that piece of data. Okay? The database is going to be encrypted. There's going to be multiple levels of security within the single database. All right? Encrypted at the cellular level. That's what's going to be in your VCTs. That type of data convergence continues up to the enterprise. Okay? We will have cloud computing, and not cloud computing like we know it today. Today, you've got a cloud of this, you've got a stovepipe within a cloud of this, a stovepipe within a cloud of this, but when it all converges so that there's one point of data and all levels of security reach into the cloud for that one piece of data for multiple uses, that's data convergence. Okay? I have a general studies degree. I'm probably oversimplifying it, but Chief, jump in if I say anything wrong, okay? All right. So the third part of convergence is talk convergence, okay? So right now, if you go into a talk, if you go into a BCT talk, anyone been in a BCT talk in the last 3 years? Raise your hand. Okay, so you go in, and the S6 is over here, and they've got all their stuff, and nobody can touch their stuff, and and then you go through a skiff, and you go through concertina wire, and the S2's over here, nobody can touch their stuff, and only they can touch their stuff, and so the talk's going to converge. Because of transport convergence and data convergence, it's going to be one talk, and every joker that works in there is going to have a TS clearance. Okay? So it's going to blow your mind how what we're, server blade, server blade, server blade, server blade, it's not going to be like that anymore. All those mission command systems that are separate now, and they have their own FSR that runs them, or their own, expert, that's going to be one database, and those FSRs are going to be gone away, and what were systems are now going to be treated as applications. So you will still have an AFATADS applications guy, but that's what he'll do. He'll run the application, okay? So that's how it's all going to change. That's how it's all going to converge. That is really what's driving enlisted transformation and some of the things that we're doing in the officer corps as well, okay? So while you can't put a day and time when it's going to happen, one of the mistakes that we've made in the Signal Corps over the last several years is we kind of designed MOSs and designed courses for what we need now or what we needed maybe 3 to 5 or even further back years ago, right? We can't do that anymore, or we will never, ever be where the Army needs us to be when they need us to be there. So we looked out at that point in the future and we said, how do we get to convergence? What do we need to look like? How do we need to train? What skill sets do we need to have? What clearances do we need to have? What rank does it need to be? All those questions, okay? And that's what we're trying to design with the personnel transformation. So if you are a 25 Papa with the 25 Papa, 25 Sierra, 25 Tango right now, you're gonna become a strategic transmission systems operator. Right now, if you think of Earth terminals or METs, if you're familiar with METs, they're fairly new in the force. That's what you're going to be. You're a 25 Fox will do strategic transport, okay? Many of those same MOSs will also, instead of being strategic, they'll be tactical transport, okay? So think JNNs, CPNs, SCTs, TCNs, those types of things. That's going to be the tactical transport. And then 25 uniform, we're going to take 25 Charlie, which is almost exactly the same thing as 25 uniform, and we're going to roll that with 25 uniform. Those two skill sets, which are so similar already, that's going to become one MOS. Oh, before I go on, we're changing from 17 to 11, and when there's only 26 letters in the alphabet, sometimes the algorithm gets really hard choosing the letter for a new MOS, so you may not like it that we're going to have a 25 alpha enlisted MOS, but believe me, it was like the best of the worst, okay? So DA has some really hard, fast rules that they won't let you use certain letters within certain years or on leap year or something. So this is how we came up with the letters we're going to use. The Commandant didn't want to reuse 25 Bravo, so that was out, So the letters really, they're almost as important as like unit lineage when it comes to figuring out how to rename things. So 25 uniform and the Limas are going to get rolled into several of these MOSs. You can see they're kind of pointing into several. And then it's going to depend on their scores and what they qualify for and that kind of stuff. But those slots are going to convert into several of the different new MOSs, and the Limas will be completely gone. So 25 Mike, 25 Romeo, and 25 Victor. You may not be familiar with those. Those are all our visual information MOSs. They're taught up at Fort Meade. They're not taught down here. They fall in combat camera units, PSYOP, a couple other places. We haven't really done anything to transform them with this action. We were looking at combining a couple of them, but instead the Public Affairs Chief of the Army has asked us to look at combining our VI MOSs with Public Affairs. A lot of good reasons for it, but we're studying that right now, and we expect that it's probably not a core mission set of the Signal Corps anymore. So it probably is going to happen in some form or fashion, but we're trying to make sure that we do it deliberately and do it right, so that the Army still gets all their mission sets accomplished. Okay, so down to 25 Alpha. I'm going to save that for last. Let's talk about 25 Kilo. So 25 Bravo and 25 November. Whether you've served in a tactical unit or a strategic unit, you've probably seen that they have a lot of, one can do a lot of what the other one does. It kind of just makes sense to combine those two MOSs, okay? And that is where ComSec is going to fall. That's the MOS that's going to take on ComSec as initial duty. We're taking it out of 25 Delta. It's officially not being taught in 25 Delta as of, the first week in May? That sound about right? Okay. So that's the only change we've made to 25 Delta, is that no ComSec in 25 Delta anymore. Now, that hurts you guys out there that need ComSec custodians, and we recognize that. We've been asked to make an MOS for ComSec. That can't work because an MOS, you can't do ComSec until you're an NCO, right? You're supposed to be a staff sergeant to be a custodian. And if we made an MOS that was ComSec custodian, they would do the exact same job as a staff sergeant and a sergeant major. And that is not the way to manage an MOS. There's no career progression there, right? So it can't work as an MOS. It's got to be an additional duty. We've proposed that it goes into 25 Kilo because that's where the Bravos and the Novembers were. In the meantime, if you need a ComSec custodian, the rules haven't changed from what they were 10 years ago. Find a guy in your formation who has or can get a TS clearance, can go to school, can be trusted with this difficult, and demanding job, and get him ComSec trained. It's an additional duty. Unfortunately, that's what we're stuck with. We aren't producing enough 25 Deltas to keep up with the demand in the force, and I know that strains you, but the last ForceCom G6 Colonel or General Kilgo said, if I even hear of you putting a 25 Delta in a vault, I'll crush you anyway. So you're kind of stuck. So that's what's going to happen to ComSec. 25 Kilo is also going to take on any of those tin company skills, right? So if you had someone that was BIC certified and that kind of stuff, that tin type mission is going to be fulfilled by the 25 Kilo MOS, okay? And really no changes to the Spectre Manager MOS either. So TSSCI is going to be required for 4 of the MOS. Oh, let me talk about 25 Alpha real quick. Okay. So 25 Alpha is our MOS that we're really looking really far out there for, okay? This is really the crystal ball MOS. But what we know is we need someone to do access control of that brigade, division, core database, right? That person, since we're going to have a multi-layer database, multi-levels of security, and someone's going to have to manage that. And we've never had an MOS that just did the servers, right? We kind of grabbed somebody and said, yeah, this guy seems like he's smart. He's going to work in the server room for a while. Then maybe had to go do ComSec or whatever. This is someone who's going to do that, and they're going to start their career, E1. They're going to work in tactical units, and eventually they're going to progress and work at RCCs. So that server and access control and security expertise is going to be grown in the Army from the tactical level and work up through the strategic level as they get more senior. Okay, so that person has to have a TSSCI clearance from a session. Okay, we haven't made 25 kilo a TSSCI requirement across the board because kilos are still going to serve in places where there's probably only going to be secret or lower information. But once you reach that job that's in the S6 where the talk has converged, you'll need a TSSCI clearance. But describe that correctly, Lamar? To all of 25 kilo? Is that new? Oh, it's not new. Okay, so that's why Lamar's here, because sometimes I say crazy stuff. Okay, so kilo, delta, echo, and alpha, TSSCI across the board. All right, we got that straight. Okay, so down at the bottom, I've kind of talked about all the other reasons for doing this enlisted transformation. So here's the status of this action. These actions are submitted to TRADOC for them to staff and then eventually send up to DAG1, usually in about the first week of June, okay? We're still in the process of getting feedback from them. Hey, you didn't dot the I, you didn't cross the T, I wanted it packaged like this, you packaged it like this. So we're still working on that. We're shooting to have ours signed so that it can continue the staffing up to DA by the 15th of August. That's kind of late, but this is the biggest undertaking that TRADOC has right now. And to be honest, the folks at the TRADOC Proponency Office, they've been okay with us kind of getting the feedback and working on it, because everybody in the Army, every MOS or every branch submits their changes on the 1st of June. So those 4 guys in the Proponency Office at TRADOC have to go through every action in the Army. So if field artillery is changing 7 MOSs, they got to staff that. If signal's changing, 17 down to 13, they got to staff that. So they're busy guys. They're okay with how we've kind of rolled this out. So I can't tell you right now if it's 50-50 that it'll pass. If they'll come back to us and say, we want you to rephase this and maybe just focus on Papa Charlie and Lima, we really don't have a good feel for how it's going to come back right now. But we know something needs to change, and we gotta move out and get working on it. Okay. So more to follow on how that's going to be approved or implemented. It is submitted as if we will execute in FY19. Just for your planning factors. Okay. So before I move on, I usually have a lot of questions on this slide. Any questions on enlisted transformation? Did I answer all your questions? Okay. All right. That's good. Yes. Yes. Right. So if you are going from a Bravo to a Kilo, we will give you Delta training for the November piece of it, right? And so most of those transition courses, that's a really important thing I probably should have had a slide for. Transition courses, anytime you change, like when we took all the 25 Foxes and said, your November's now, you got to go to transition training. There's always transition to be done. And we usually teach a course here at Fort Gordon. There's a couple other options. Well, because of the course lengths and because of just the demand on Fort Gordon that this is going to make, we can't afford, or we don't have enough bed space on Fort Gordon to bring everybody back to Fort Gordon for their transition, okay? So here's the model that we'll use. We'll use Land Warnet EU, computer-based training, for a good chunk of your transition. And then each of the course training developers has looked at and said, this much can be done online, these skills, this knowledge, whatever. The rest of it is going to be taught at a CCOM Signal University near you. Now, I don't really know how that CCOM Signal University is going to work out. It won't be the model that's out there now because you guys are paying for that. If 10th Mountain has a Signal University on Fort Drum, they're paying for that, right? So we're not going to use your training money to transition the Army. It'll be an Army bill, and you will either go to one of a few places, or the MTTs will come to you and teach a number of people at your installation for the hands-on piece. Go ahead.
I know like when they did the boxes, there were a few got left behind because they were pre-flight in the training, and they never got to pre-flight. They ended up getting out of the because there was never an opportunity to track. Will that happen? And what about
So do you want to take that one, Lamar? I know the answer, but if you can probably say it faster.
Yeah, well, November, I'm a little bit blind. Can you hear me? So, Yankee 2, Yankee 3.
No, you got to. They're recording it.
Oh,
Go
okay.
ahead.
So, at E89, after SOC, there'll be full MOS transferred over. So, if you're an SOC graduate as Staff Sergeant, Sergeant First Class, you won't have Yankee 2, Yankee 3 transition ASI requiring the other half of the MOS.
We're just going to declare you the new MOS on the day it goes hot.
For
No transition
November's,
training.
the current November Yankee 2, they still have until 30 September to get their transition training. So there's still Yankee 2 November's out in the Army until 30 September. The 100 and so left out of the 768 that we started with. So there's still opportunity if you have focus.
Go ahead.
Ma'am, comment and question. I'm sorry, but I'm the old senior 25 at the Sergeant in the Army. And we heard about the transition of code to all 25 medical bills to CSSCI for phenomenal. I've been a huge proponent of that effort for a long time because of respect for management collaboration with Afcea on EMI switching and coordinating with the
Right.
I do have a question. You mentioned it earlier, I apologize if I said that, but I did. I see it's notional. So when are they proposing that this always becomes a new?
So the way this works is we submit it to TRADOC. We usually get an answer in the fall sometime. Last year we got an answer in October, on the officer one. I think it was November. It was the same day that General Pugh became a general. I know that. Anyway, so we'll get an answer back from them, but we have submitted it as if it will become effective in 19, so FY19. Now there's an important caveat to that because you can't just turn on the personnel systems and everyone's this MOS on that day. You got to start to have some training the year before. So we will, based on we'll use UFERS the year before in FY18 to start putting people through the full length new MOS courses, because what you don't want to do is have a guy graduate like on September 2nd and then say, hey, after 1 October you're going to have to come back and get your new MOS, right? We don't want to do that. So you sort of have to have a transition year, and that's done on UFERS, unfortunately for this, because that's just the time frame we got to work off of. Yep. So reserves are also going to have the transition the same way we did transition courses, and for the most part they will come here for the full length MOS courses. We're working on it. We haven't absolutely worked out concurrence of the reserve component for this because of course lengths. They're limited by the number of phases they can do for a course, and right now the 25 Alpha course is just so long that they cannot sign off on it because they have to be able to teach some of these MOSs in their reserve training institutes. Is that what they're called? Yeah, RTIs. So that's the long pole in the tent, but that's something we're working on every day with them to say, all right, so if we can adjust this, can you guys do this, and work that out. But right now, for the most part, they'll come here for the full-length course, and they always do for AIT. But for transition courses, they're going to pretty much follow the same model as us, and they'll have some CCOM teaching at their RTIs. Did that answer your question? Another question in the back? So those folks will work, for example, 53rd, right? 53rd Signal Battalion. Right, strategic only, right. I think it's 270 Signal Company in Korea, right, that does the big terminals in Korea. Right. 307, the RHNs, that'll be a strategic. Well, non-deployable gives a negative connotation, but they will be in strategic units, yes. With no TA-50, how's that? Doesn't mean they can't do PT. Okay.
And one more question. The Trojans are going to be coming to the signal. Are we getting the 35 tangos or not?
We are not, because 35 Tango has a number of other duties within the BCT. 35 Tango manages multiple other sensors. So we've actually spent a lot of time looking at this to see if there were personnel savings. If we take on the McNay, can MI give up the 35 Tango bodies? No, they've got other duties that won't go away even when we take the McNay. So there's really no savings there, unfortunately. Yes.
Talk about converting the MI network with Singapore. You also have another set of IP with
Yep, so that's the last step of transport convergence. The first step is the MI community, the second step is medical, and then the third step will be the logistics community. And that once all those converge to the one Army network, then transport convergence will be complete. So it's a few years down the road. Yep.
Earlier we saw a slide that was showing how the BCTs are going to be stacked up with the manning with the current MLS structure. Is the manning going to reduce even lower with this? Are we going to ask a lot more of
So the thing that's going to be asked more of them is we have converted some of the Bravo. We converted a Bravo position to make an Alpha position in that S6 shop. So that guy that probably also did land support or something else, he's going to be dedicated to the database. But other than that, we don't lose any signal bodies in the formations. We just converted them to a different signal MOS. Same number of people. The questions? I got a lot more to talk about. Officers, warrant officers, it's really exciting stuff. But good questions. Okay. So, warrant officer transformation. This has been going on for a few years now, right? We were 251s and 254s, and everybody became a 255, and then we added the Sierra MOS. We're still struggling to recruit the Sierras and get them through school and then retain them, but it is proving very worthy. So what I can tell you about I'm going to talk a little bit about 255 Sierras. So we're still struggling. Like I said, we're still struggling to recruit enough of them and graduate enough of them. We've got a couple things we're working on. There's alphas and Novembers out there in the formation that we're probably going to look at them and say, hey, of the 10 requirements for you to be a Sierra, you've already met 7 of them. We're going to figure out how to get you the other 3 in a shorter distance and convert you to a Sierra. Not involuntarily, don't get me wrong, because we know y'all just fell out of it. But we got to find a way to get Sierras faster and get them to work. Now, part of the problem was that every Sierra we trained went straight to the Cyber Protection Brigade, right? And some of them actually became 170 alphas. They converted over to be cyber warrants when the cyber MOS stood up. So that hurts. But if we do nothing and we continue at the same rate, we won't have Sierras in your divisions, your BCTs. You won't be filled for 10 years. So something's got to change. Production's got to change. We're still recruiting the Sierras from the same force we were recruiting from before. So what's going to change is we're going to find a way to give some constructive credit for it. Did I describe that accurately, Phil?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Limited, and then the other thing that we're going to be doing is we have CDSS people on active
Right, so when 170 Alpha stood up, we kind of said, hey, there might be some redundancy between the Sierra and the Alpha. We want to make sure that the tasks are separate and concrete, and that will help us reduce the course length, which one of the main complaints we've heard from warrant officers is they don't want to come to school for a year and then PCS again. It's a fair complaint. It's kind of like CGSC, but not as advantageous to your career, right? Except when you want to transition to be out of the Army. So, Sierra's a big focus for us. Like Mr. Sine said, if you couldn't hear, we are getting ready to do a critical task site selection board for the warrant officer MOSs. That happens every few years. You have to, kind of take a look at yourself and say, these are the tasks we're teaching, these are the skills we're teaching, or the knowledge base we're teaching. Is it still on track? So we bring in representatives from all of the different types of units, net, comm, tactical, whatever, and they sit on the panel, and it's grueling work, isn't it? It really is. You're locked in a room all day, and you talk about one tiny little task, and you can argue about it for an hour and a half. No, we don't do that. Yes, we do it. No, it doesn't need to be done. It's something else. And that's how we hammer out that training strategy for every MOS in the Army. So it's supposed to be done 3 to 5 years? Every 3 to 5 years? Every 3 years. We're behind on CTS-SBs. The warrant officers is probably the last one we're going to do for this FY, and then it all starts over again next year. What else do I want to tell you about this? All warrant officers require TSSCI. Period. End of story. If you're a warrant officer out there and you haven't started applying for your TS, go ahead and get that done. It takes a long time to get them. We want you to be MOS qualified. We want you to be prepared for your next warrant officer education school. We also, in the last couple years, have developed a warrant officer ILE follow-on course, which is more technical education. It's one more chance to come back to Gordon and get technical education later in your career, okay? Had good feedback on the course so far from the folks that are going to it. And you got a question?
So, for the Sierra, this effort's been going on for a while.
Right.
And how much is the provider, I've known one of us that have looked at I'm not going to try to, but why don't we open it up to as a regular MOS versus having an outcome of here and open it up to, because we have to go charge some COs that can probably fill that in, because there's not a huge population of us that are like stuck.
Right.
No fight, because we're so stuck in alpha November, and it's like some of them don't want to work. We just like what we do. But there's a bunch of NCOs that I know that are coming up, and that we had a conversation today, saying that there's we're trying to cater in our recruiting plan nowadays is a different millennial generation. And why don't we just open it up to them? Because obviously it's not working. The alphas and the betas aren't coming.
Right. Well, because we can't tell of the problems that we have, we can't tell what is the biggest problem. The biggest problem we believe was that we were just handing them all off to Cyber Protection Brigade. So until we have a few months where we're not doing that, we really can't figure out if the problem is we can't recruit enough from alphas and Novembers. We don't like to turn our personnel, recruitment strategies. We don't like to try and be too reactive with those, because that can really come back and backfire. And then you can end up with an imbalance in one of the other MOSs, and then you're trying to fix that, and it's sort of like, well, you kind of caused all this yourself. Is that an accurate description, Phil?
Yeah, and I would add to it also is our original intent on the 65 Sierra was to take a seasoned warrant officer, someone that really was an expert on network operations and information systems, and then grow them into the 255 Sierra, and oh, by the way, put that CW3 back down in the brigade so you had, brigade combat teams put it up, and you had the wide area transport, 65 Alpha, maybe the W1, the information systems is W1, and then you have to go into W2, obviously. And then you have the CW3, a more senior warrant officer, more experienced warrant officer, in charge of network security at that level. So that's our original intent. Now, we may have to adjust as we move forward, and that's something we may have to look at. But right now, we're trying to do other fixes, hopefully to get us to a solution.
And once we get an actual 25 Delta workforce, a significant number of 25 deltas in the workforce, we may go back and say, this makes perfect sense to take the deltas and make that a natural progression as you become a 255 Sierra. But for now, we kind of need to not be reactive and see, it's really hard to see when you see a problem out there in the force, a couple promotion boards come back, you can't react too quickly because you might cause your own problems, right? Unintended consequences. And I don't mean that to brush off that it needs to be addressed, but this needs to be a very deliberate business because you're going to affect the whole career field.
The other thing is we're often used to that same talent pool.
Right.
E6, 25 Alpha, 25 November, 25 Bravo, 25 November would be high-tech skills. So the enlisted are trying to flesh out the 25 Delta. We're trying to flesh out the more. We're kind of zeroed in on that same skill set. So we've got to be careful that we don't hurt the enlisted M1 at the same time we're trying to flesh out the more.
Right. Okay. Other questions about warrant officers? Pretty straightforward. Nothing too radical. Okay. Officer transformation. Boy, this is the one that gets emotional. Okay. So, we had a problem. With 53 alphas and BCTs, cabs, sustainment brigades, we got those captain billets down there in that S6 shop. Cannot recruit and graduate enough 53 alphas to fill those billets. Haven't ever been able to, okay? We went from, having a pretty good force of 53s, and then when modularity happened, man, we really strained the system, and we're just not getting the candidates that we want. You can see in their promotion rates, it's sort of like proved itself a problem, right? 53s of our officer MOSs have the lowest promotion rates, okay? So we have to solve that problem. But what they do at the BCT is pretty important. The integration of mission command systems, the information security, it's pretty crucial to what the BCT S6 does. And that person has also sort of been a de facto assistant brigade S6, okay? That captain. So we got that problem. And then if you look at the 25 Alpha education for about the last several years, we haven't kept up with the technological advancements in our equipment, okay? The officer education, and don't get me wrong, I don't want to get the ire of the warrant officers. Yeah, I don't need 25 alphas turning wrenches on routers. I know that. They don't need to be that technical. But they need to have more of a technical education as officers to be able to understand what's in their formation, what they need to plan, what they need to, manage, right? We're not giving them the technical education that they need. So there's the other problem. So we came up with 25 Golf. 25 Golf, a captain comes to the captain's career course, then he stays for 19 weeks and 4 days and gets basically a lot of what was in the 53 course, plus MDMP, signal planning. He becomes the net ops officer at the brigade, okay, as a captain. He comes out of that, he goes into that captain billet in the brigade S6. Now here's the other thing. After he does that for a year, he's got to go there first because we need that skill. We need that work done in the brigade. Then he's still got to get KD'd, he or she. And I don't mean to be, I'm not favoring one gender over another. I did all these as captains too. So he or she goes to the 25 Golf position in the brigade S6 and then still needs to go get a battalion S6 job or get selected for the company command, okay? They still need to be KD'd as a captain. Everybody got that? So you're not being pigeonholed and not being given the opportunity to be an S6 or a company commander. You just have to go do sort of a utilization tour first, which I think all you TWI folks, you understand that. Cool. Then as a major, you've already got that technical background. You're an ideal candidate to be the BCT, the CAB, the Sustainment Brigade S6, okay? It's a skill set. It's better training for an officer. What we're not intending to do is to pigeonhole you into a career path, okay? That's not what we mean to do at all. We mean to give our officers better education and fill those positions in the BCTs with officers that know how to do the integration of the mission command systems and the network operations, okay? And then as you progress up, you can compete. You know, we want 25 Golfs to be competitive for promotion to major. We want them to be competitive for selection to CGSC. And then we want them to compete for, just like we always have since at least 2008, Battalion Command or Division G6. Okay, it's not meant to pigeonhole. We've got some changes that we need to make to 600-3 so that that is clear to everybody in the Army, promotion boards, and everybody that manages signal personnel in the Army. But that is how this is intended to work. Okay. Questions about that? Really, no questions? Go ahead.
So are all captains that are going for BCP getting this golf training?
No. The Battalion S6 positions and the company command positions are coded 25 Alpha. So only, you know, if there's 8 battalions in a BCT, one captain, or there'd be 9, 10, company commander and the captain in the S6. So one captain out of 10 is going to go to the golf course. Now when he moves around, that person and whoever decides I'm moving him from here to here needs to make sure that someone else gets to the golf course, right? So you've got that skill set in the Brigade S6. So when it's time to move him on, you need to manage somebody, get him back here to school, or get him to, eventually we'll have some shorter versions of the course, and there'll be some distance learning and that kind of stuff for it. But right now, it's resident course here, 19 weeks, 4 days. Does that answer your question? Okay. All right, let's talk, oh, go ahead.
So, for Division G6s, we usually get our Signal and our IAM, we get one of our, we take it from the shot our but now that we're making the BCP 25 goal, your first rodeo as a first Bravo actually starts with Division before they, and I'm not sure we want them to OJT at that level.
There's still a 53 Alpha position in the G6 as a captain. And there's still captain billets out there in the Army, they're just not in the BCTs anymore.
Correct. I guess my question is, I think it's okay to OJT at the BCT level, but at division and above level, we should be at the A game and get there.
Right.
I won't have that kind of development now, that's my first opportunity with the outside, first division and above.
That's true, but it's going on now anyway. I mean, as a Division G6, I had 153 who had experience and 153 who came to me straight from the course, both majors. One had my IA job, one had the demo job, right? So, I mean, it's true, but it's not ideal, I guess, if that's how you manage it. But let me tell you what we're doing with the Bravo, the 26 Bravo course, okay? So, probably 53 Alphas, the ones that were worthy of promotion and that, you know, kind of met those things that we're looking for, STEM degrees and that kind of stuff, they weren't getting the same level of education that our 24 Alphas were. They were getting training in pushing buttons and making certain software and hardware work, right? Which is how we have been training our enlisted force. They weren't getting education, like PhD person teaching a master's level of education, which is how the 24 courses run. 24s, remarkably, doesn't matter if you come to your first job, you know, they seem to just do better in that first job. So if we recruit the right people with the right accession criteria and we educate them on the same level we've been educating 24s, we believe we're going to have a better outcome in our units. So that's one of the reasons what you're just describing is, you know, we weren't sending them out of here with the best chance of success. We believe that the changes we're going to make to that 26 Bravo course are gonna improve that problem set. And again, it's a crystal ball, right? Something's got to change. Do our best. Education seems to be a good pathway. It seems to have worked for the 24 Alphas. We'll take our shot. All right. Other questions? And then there's not really much change to the 24 Alpha MOS. We've relabeled it 26 Alpha. So 26 Alphas and Bravos compete as one AOC for promotions, for CSL, that kind of stuff. And then they combine at the rank of colonel to 26 Zulu. Yeah, so the only other thing that I haven't mentioned in any of my any of my, the ranks that I've talked about, or the cohorts that I've talked about, is that every time we do a CTSSB or a SME panel here at Fort Gordon, we've kind of changed our way of thinking. And rather than pursue that buttonology or that task-centric thinking with our panels, what we're looking for now is Bloom's taxonomy, and it's learning outcomes, so that you're sort of getting an aptitude, right? Instead of, I know how to push these buttons, but if you ask me to push any other buttons, I don't know how to do it, right? We want you to understand signal flow, to understand how things work together, integration, that kind of stuff. So we're trying to change, even the enlisted courses, kind of get away from task, button, to if I know this and I know this, well, I can figure that out, right? So two things that we did in that regard. First, we've been talking about that, and we've been changing every CTSSB or SME panel that meets over any of the MOSs. And the other thing is, the previous commandant had us develop a set of, I can't say common tasks because that means something Army, big Army-wise, right? But signal core tasks, signal shared tasks, something like that, right? And so if you've got a 25 whatever, he knows how to make a Cat5 cable. He knows how IP routing basically works. He knows antenna theory. He knows, just signal stuff, right? Because the maneuver guy goes, oh, you're a 25? Okay, we'll go fix that. And we don't want them, we want a basic set that's common to all basic communicators. That's what we're pursuing in the schoolhouse, really from top to bottom, in all of our courses. Okay. So a little more, this is where the 25 golf billets are going to reside. Again, if you get up to the lieutenant colonel level, and don't be distracted by, the G6 billet is a 25 golf billet. We're going to fix everything so that everyone competes evenly for CSL at the 05 level. Okay? And you can see, if you're a captain, you're either going to go to the S6 in one of the brigades, or you're going to go to an ESB S3. And that assistant S3 in the ESB is a 25 golf. And the S3 in an ESB is a 25 golf. And then they're probably still going to progress, and they're going to go to a 25 alpha billet after they do the 25 golf. They're going to go be the XO after they've been the S3, just like they always have. Okay? So interchangeable. You can move back and forth between both MOSs. When 25 golf hits your ORB, you're still going to be a 25 alpha also. Okay? And then you're just managed by, how do you say that, Phil? You're managed by your personnel folks? Your control MOS. Okay. So this is how we think a person's gonna progress through their career, right? This is what we're looking for at every grade in, pre-commissioning, innovative thinkers, physically fit, lifelong learning. And these are what the positions are coded as of right now, okay? If you go up there to battalion commander, we're probably going to end up changing all of the G6 and battalion commands back to 25 alpha or to 25 golf. But right now I think we're leaning towards changing them all to 25 alpha. But the golf, you're going to compete at captain for KD time. You're going to be competitive for selection to major, be competitive for selection to CGSC. And you're going to be a better trained captain than the other people that just go to the SCCC. Until a point out there in the future when everybody gets the same level, every signal officer will get that higher amount and level of technical training. Because that's really where we want to go. That's what we really want to accomplish for the Signal Corps. Yep.
So, Emma, maybe not right. Speaking from Hawaii next. So we have Hawaii, Japan, Alaska, all of Europe, and Korea still have lieutenant colonel directors and 2 major leads for the next. So I guess they would say 25 alphas. But
Right.
would we as a Signal Corps foresee that we'll ever bring the military back into the air from next?
No, I don't think that's ever going to happen. I think NetCom structure is pretty solid, and they've been successful with it in CONUS, and I don't think the Army can afford that force, to be honest. I think that's how we ended up with much of CONUS being civilian workforce. And then OCONUS, it's just easier to have that military workforce, OCONUS.
Do you think we'll sustain that, lieutenant colonel, 2 years, in the next?
I think we will for the foreseeable future, yeah. Either the battalion will inactivate completely, depending on what's going on in that part of the world, or it'll remain with the NEC director being the battalion commander. And interestingly enough, I've had a couple of the TSSBs come back to us. Now, those are TDA units, and so they control their own structure, right? They can say, I want this to be a mess sergeant instead of a 25 uniform or whatever. But they have come back to us and said, we really want a 25 golf in the plans billet. We really want to add a 25 golf here and there. So they're seeing that person has some network integration skills, or will have, and they're asking for that skill set in their formations. So they are interspersed throughout the signal commands, the TSSBs, and the TTSBs. Yeah, you know me. Okay. So moving forward, this is our bridging strategy. Right now, there are captains they've graduated from SCCC, and they're going to the full-length 53 Alpha course. So they're only getting 53 Alpha exactly how it is today, but that was our bridging strategy to sort of start moving towards training 25 golfs. Come November, we'll start the real 25 golf course. We did UFIRS for the training development, and the folks will start that course, what day in November? Like 4 November or something like that? Yeah. So, and then after that, we'll start to field the force with 25 golfs. Okay, here's where the KD positions are. Again, that's going to change. Lieutenant Colonel is going to change either to Alpha, or everybody will become a golf at the 05 level. That's pretty much the two ways it's going to turn out. Okay? And have to serve that first year in a utilization billet. Okay. And then I've already talked a little bit about the substitutability. There's a message that will say it's for a number of years. We expect that'll take longer to fill the reserve component forces, just because of the length of school. And throughput for the course is always the hardest thing to get past. This is 25, thought I had some animation there. 26 Alpha development. That's a question I've been asked often. What should a 53, which will be a 26 Bravo, what job should they do? And we always say seek a variety of assignments at a variety of levels, operational, strategic, seek the information security side of the house, the IA and cybersecurity, and then seek the info systems and the DAMO side of the house as well, if you're trying to diversify your career. Okay, and nothing left but questions. You're still Bob Topper? Good to know.
I saw there's 25 alphas on the enlisted and officer side. That would be easy for us to get through, but I think that will immediately want us to understand. They're interchangeable.
Yeah, they'll be assigned interchangeably. Substitutability.
Back to the kind of enlisted, once again at the NEC, we had our 25 Bravo concept section. We do have 5 soldiers, but it was taken from an E6 last year to an E5 on the last, now we're at TDA. So this year's TDA, we're at E5 concept, and so that just made it hard because that made us pull one of our 2 Bravos that were actually on the network and make them concept, or it made us take a civilian and then put them in a concept. I think the 3 next in under the 516, they all made took a civilian off the network, put them in the concept office, and we mostly use our concept soldiers for IA.
Yeah.
Because there's a big gap in the net. There's no section that does cybersecurity in the net, so we get them in the concept soldiers for that.
Roger.
There was no gap, and there's too much of a requirement for cybersecurity, such as scanning. And those Bravos did a great job with the ACAS and a little bit of the patching in the cybersecurity section. So that's how we had to get around that, and when it was changed. But as asked, looking at, if you take that 26, it put a strain on the unit to pull. Because we stole them out of concept, then we had to steal them off the network.
Right, and so strategic units like 516th and 1st Signal Brigade in Korea, they went through the same thing that tactical units went through first, which was the grade plate. And that's how you ended up with only an E5 position. And so pretty much everyone's been hit by a grade plate in the Army, whether you're in a strategic unit or a TRADOC unit or a tactical Army unit. We've gone through a round of grade plating, and divisions are facing the same problem. They don't have the grade of the person to be the ComSec custodian, so they're stealing from the automation section or the IA section as well. Unfortunately, that's sort of a top-driven, that's a FDU, TAA process.
And one of the things I learned a while back, they don't have to be a 25 series to go to the process. It may not be the first series.
Right.
But if you were the next, so we only really had John 5.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I think when I was in Korea, we had a couple of Sierras in the ComSec vault, which seems like a huge waste, but they were really good ComSec custodians. Okay. Other questions? Oh my goodness, are you still Bob Topper? Of course you have one more question.
I heard you say that we want to make a lot more slots TS. So we're going,
Is he here?
our S2 as a brigade is denying a lot of folks opportunity to get their TS because they said you're not an IM level 2, which requires the TS. So for civilians, it was easy. It's an IM 2 that got TS. But for the soldiers, if you weren't in a TS billet, however we determine that, the units were not allowing those people to renew their TSs or get new TSs. So with this new, is there any kind of STRATCOM that will allow the S2 section to go or provide money that will allow the soldiers to start, or the warrant officers to start getting their TSs in advance?
Right. So again, we're kind of mixing apples and oranges because it's not an MTO unit, right? So the solution for you would be to go back through 311th and NetCom through the force management folks and say, we have this need. This TDA needs to have this billet marked for a TS, and this is what they'll be doing, right? That's the way to address it from that perspective. But once, when the enlisted transformation gets approved, then the authorization documents will also update with, the billets will say this billet requires TSSCI. Right. This, for the 4 MOSs, it'll just be straight across the board. When they come to school, they got to get a TS. But in other places, if it's a billet requirement, it will update in all the authorization documents.
How would that be? How do you kind of evaluate
For an MOS requirement?
Oh, that's different. And what requirement is not the same thing. Now the authorization is required. It's two different things.
Right. So if you're talking unit level at the MTO level, then they have to command has to do that.
The command has to do that in their UMAR.
I asked the question because the man back there asked the question. I want to make sure he got it right. MOS requirement is completely different. Right. That's when we changed 60600-03, I think it is. Now we made the MOS without that requirement. But if we just say that the info or the authorization, that's up to the NACOM.
Right. So you go back to NetCom.
So by way of example, we made the warrant officers using the regulation. All of our warrant officer MOS as a prerequisite require ES, SCI. Doesn't matter what the coding is in the document. As of last year, 1 October, all warrant exercise that they assessed, they had applied for TSSCI. Those that are in the inventory had 3 years from that date to get the TSSCI. So it doesn't matter. It does matter
So, if you talk to General Fogarty, he will tell you that he's having that dialogue almost daily with the G2 of the Army and the G3 of the Army, saying this is, the things that you're asking us to do in the MI, cyber, and signal communities. The bill is coming, and you need to be prepared for it. But it is slow to roll out, and the word doesn't get down to every little old lady in tennis shoes who can say, nope, you can't have a clearance. So it's slower than we would like it to be, for sure.
So it's a big Army bill, and the Army's got to figure out a way to pay for it. Of course, the National Guard is kind of got some separate issues, but especially as you go to option version, basically all those LOSs that are in the top have got to have a PSSCI to do their job. We have no choice. The Army's got to figure out a way to pay the bill. So there may be a delay. It may take longer because of so many people that are applying to get the clearance, and maybe the dollar may not come as fast, but it has to happen.
I think we're out of time, but I'll stay and answer anybody's questions.